Chad didn't even look up from his phone. A woman had just walked through the door of the Root and Roast on Decatur Street. Brown hoodie, worn sneakers, a reusable tote bag hanging from one shoulder. She stepped quietly to the counter and waited. Chad glanced up, looked her over once slowly, deliberately, the way someone does when they've already made up their mind before you open your mouth. He leaned across the counter, voice loud enough for the nearest table to hear. "Sweetheart, just so you know, a latte here runs $7. This isn't one of those dollar coffee spots for people like you." He let the pause do the work. Kayla leaned over from the second register, looked the woman up and down, and smiled with just her teeth. "Honey, the shelter on 5th does free breakfast until 10. Might be more your speed." The woman said nothing, stood still, hands at her sides. Chad tilted his head, glancing at her tote bag, her worn sneakers, her unhurried calm, and that calm seemed to irritate him more than anything else. "No offense," he said, not meaning it at all, "but we get a lot of you black girls wandering in thinking this is a charity window. It's not. So you buying something, or are we done here?" The words landed in the room like something dropped from a height. A woman at the nearest table looked up from her cup. A man by the window stopped mid-sip. Nobody said anything. The woman reached into her tote bag, placed a crisp $50 bill flat on the counter. Looked Chad directly in the eyes, steady, unhurried, unblinking. She didn't flinch. She didn't explain herself. She didn't need to, because what Chad didn't know, what neither of them could have possibly imagined standing behind that counter, was that every dollar inside that register, every bean in that grinder, every single brick of the building they were standing in, had her name on it. Don't you dare scroll past this one. Stay with this story, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Drop your location and local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're watching this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the story that makes you do it. Let's go. The alarm on Naomi Carter's phone went off at 4:45 in the morning. She didn't groan. She didn't roll over and hit snooze. She sat up in the dark, the way people do when they've been awake for 10 minutes already, just waiting for permission to move. The bedroom was large and quiet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown Atlanta, the city still dim and blinking below, like embers that hadn't quite caught. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, bare feet on cool hardwood, and let the silence settle around her. Then she stood up and got to work. The penthouse was beautiful, but it wasn't decorated the way people expected. No gold fixtures, no statement furniture, no artwork chosen to impress. The walls held framed photographs not of skylines or awards, but of people. Staff members at grand openings. Regulars who'd been coming in for years. A picture of a young woman in her mid-20s standing behind a steel pushcart on the corner of Ponce de Leon Avenue, grinning like she'd just won something enormous. The cart had a hand-lettered sign zip-tied to the front. The Root and Roast. Established 2010. $3 a cup. Come as you are. That woman was Naomi. 14 years ago. $400 in startup capital, a used espresso machine she'd bought off Craigslist, and a thermos she'd been filling with her grandmother's chicory blend since she was 12 years old. She walked past that photograph without looking at it. She'd seen it 1,000 times. In the bathroom, she studied her reflection for a long moment. Then she reached for the brown hoodie hanging on the back of the door. Faded at the elbows. A small bleach stain near the left cuff that she'd never bothered to fix. She pulled it over a plain white t-shirt, stepped into dark jeans, laced up a pair of sneakers with a crease worn deep into the toe box. She removed her watch, a slim gold piece her mother had given her when the 30th location opened. She took off her rings, her earrings, everything that cost something. She looked in the mirror again. Good. The garage held 2 vehicles, a charcoal gray Range Rover with tinted windows and a personalized plate. And beside it, a 2011 Toyota Camry, the color of old pewter dented rear bumper, a crack running along the bottom right corner of the windshield that she kept meaning to fix. She grabbed the Camry keys. Before she backed out, she paused. The gas gauge had been broken for 8 months. The needle permanently stuck at a quarter tank, no matter what was actually in it. Naomi had learned to track mileage instead, keeping a small notepad in the center console. She flipped it open, checked the last entry, did the math in her head. Roughly 40 miles left before empty. The drive to Decatur Street was 11 miles each way. She had plenty. She clipped a body camera to the inside zipper pull of her hoodie pocket, the lens no wider than a pencil eraser, the body no thicker than a thumbnail. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. Vanessa Osei answered on the second ring. "Feeds up," Vanessa said. No greeting necessary. They had done this before. "Legal team is on standby. I've got the last 6 months of register logs for that location pulled up already." "Good," Naomi said. "Don't call me unless something goes wrong. I'll text." She backed the Camry out of the garage into the gray pre-dawn of Atlanta. The streets of Midtown were quiet. A delivery truck idling at a red light, a jogger moving through the amber wash of a street lamp, pigeons picking at something on a curb. The city was still waking up, unhurried and loose at the seams. She did this 3 times a year. No announcement, no schedule, no warning to regional managers or shift supervisors or anyone in the chain. She walked in as a customer, just a woman who wanted a cup of coffee, and she watched. She watched how her staff talked to people, how they looked at people, whether the warmth she had built this company on was still alive in the rooms she wasn't standing in. She called it her real audit. 22 minutes later, she pulled into the lot of the Root and Roast on Decatur Street, a commercial strip in a working-class neighborhood east of the city. The area was diverse Black families, Latino families, older residents who'd lived on these streets for decades, younger people moving in a neighborhood in the middle of its own quiet becoming. This location had been open for 4 years, one of her strongest in terms of foot traffic, one of the most beloved in online reviews. She sat in the Camry for a moment before going in. Through the wide front window, she could see the interior she had designed herself. Dark wood paneling, Edison bulbs strung above the counter, a mural along the back wall painted by a local artist named Darnell Oates, depicting Black faces across generations, all of them gathered around tables, all of them laughing, all of them belonging somewhere. She had commissioned that mural specifically for this location because she knew this neighborhood. She knew what it meant for people here to walk into a room and see themselves on the wall. She had built this place to feel like that. Behind the counter, 2 employees, Chad Mercer, late 20s, white, leaning against the back counter with one earbud and phone in hand, chewing something slowly. His apron was untied at the back. Kayla Finch, early 30s, white, standing at the register, whispering something to Chad with one hand over her mouth. Near the counter, 2 Black women stood waiting. They had clearly been waiting for a while. Neither Chad nor Kayla acknowledged them. Not a glance, not a raised finger, not a "be right with you." Naomi watched the clock on her dashboard. 15 seconds. 30. 45. One of the women cleared her throat politely. Kayla looked up, exhaled slowly through her nose, and said flat, without a smile, "Yeah, what do you want?" Naomi's jaw tightened. She picked up her tote bag, pushed open the car door, and walked toward the entrance. The day had officially begun. The bell above the door chimed softly when Naomi pushed it open. The smell hit her first espresso, and warm milk, and something sweet baking in the back. The exact combination she had spent 3 months perfecting when she developed the brand's sensory guidelines. She had written a 12-page document about smell, about how a room should feel before a customer even reached the counter, about the way the right scent could make a tired person feel for just a moment like they were somewhere safe. She stood just inside the entrance and let it wash over her. Then she looked at the room. The mural was still there, vivid and enormous along the back wall. The Edison bulbs cast their warm amber light. The jazz was playing low, unhurried something from Coltrane's Middle Period that she had personally added to the location's approved playlist. Tables were half full. A young Latino couple shared a croissant near the window. An older white man read a newspaper in the corner booth. 3 college students worked on laptops near the outlet strip along the side wall. Everything looked right. Everything looked exactly as it should. But behind the counter, Chad had still not put his phone away. Naomi walked to the counter and stood at the register. She waited. Chad was 3 feet away, scrolling. Kayla had drifted to the far end of the counter and was restocking cup lids with her back turned. 8 seconds, 15, 20. Chad finally looked up, not because he noticed her, but because he happened to glance in her direction. His eyes moved over her the same way they had in her imagination 100 times. A quick, dismissive read. Brown hoodie. Worn sneakers. Reusable tote bag. Nothing that registered as worth his full attention. He walked to the register without straightening up. No greeting. No eye contact. What? Not a question. Just a word dropped on a counter. Good morning, Naomi said. Her voice was quiet and even. I'd like a medium oat milk latte and a blueberry muffin, please. Chad punched it in without responding. The POS screen was angled slightly away from her, not fully turned, but enough that she couldn't read the line items clearly. She tilted her head. The screen caught the light for just a second before he shifted his body in front of it. $8.99, he said. Naomi knew the menu. A medium oat milk latte was $5.50. A blueberry muffin was $3.25. Total before tax, $8.75. With tax, $9.49 at most. Not $8.99, which was already wrong. But she had seen the screen shift. She knew there was more. Could I see the itemized total? She asked. Chad turned the screen toward her slowly, the way someone does when they're daring you to say something. The breakdown showed latte $5.50, muffin $3.25, tax 74 cents, and at the bottom a 4th line in smaller text. Specialty prep surcharge $3.50. What is the specialty prep surcharge? Naomi asked. Chad didn't look at her. It's a preparation fee. We charge it on certain orders. I've been to several root and roast locations, Naomi said, keeping her voice perfectly level. I've never seen that charge on any receipt. Chad planted both palms flat on the counter and leaned forward. His voice dropped not to a whisper, but to the particular low register men use when they want to communicate that the conversation is over. Maybe those locations run things differently. Here, that's what it costs. You want the order or not? The woman 2 tables over looked up from her phone. She glanced at Naomi, then at Chad, then back down the practiced look of someone who has learned that watching too openly comes with its own cost. Naomi held Chad's gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she reached into her tote bag and placed the $50 bill on the counter. Chad picked it up, opened the drawer, and made change. He didn't count it out. He didn't place it in her hand. He slid the bills across the counter with 2 fingers and dropped the coins from a small height, but deliberate so that 2 quarters and a dime skittered across the laminate, and 1 quarter rolled off the edge, entirely hit the floor, and spun in a narrowing circle before going flat. Chad looked at the coin on the floor, then up at Naomi. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Kayla, restocking cups nearby, glanced over and turned away quickly, but not before Naomi caught the corner of her expression. Satisfied. Entertained. Naomi bent down without a word, picked the quarter up and put it in her pocket. Then she walked to a small table near the back, positioned with a clear sightline to both the counter and the pass-through window to the kitchen. She sat down. She placed her tote on the chair beside her. Under the table, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Vanessa. Fake surcharge on my order. $3.50. Not in our system. Confirm on feed. The reply came in 4 seconds. Confirmed. Captured clean. Legal is watching live. Through the pass-through window, Naomi noticed a woman in a green apron standing at the espresso station, early 40s. Natural hair pulled back, moving with the precise efficiency of someone who had been doing this for years. The woman glanced through the window toward Chad, then toward Naomi's table. Her jaw was tight. Her hands kept moving steaming milk, pulling shots, setting cups on the counter. But her eyes were doing something else entirely. That was Scylla Washington. Naomi didn't know her name yet, but she was watching. And something in the way she was watching told Naomi she had been watching for a very long time. Naomi's latte arrived 11 minutes after she ordered it. A white couple who had ordered after her received theirs in 4. Chad carried both cups out personally, set them down with care, and said, warm, easy, like a completely different person. You guys let me know if you need anything, yeah? Naomi's cup arrived via a short slide across the pass-through window, collected by Kayla without a word, and deposited on Naomi's table with enough force to slosh foam against the inside of the lid. No eye contact. No acknowledgement. Kayla was already turning away before the cup stopped moving. Naomi wrapped both hands around the cup and watched the room. What happened over the next 40 minutes was not a series of isolated incidents. It was a system, consistent, practiced, and precise enough that it could only have been running for months. A black couple in their 50s, the woman in a church cardigan, the man in a pressed collared shirt, approached the counter together. They ordered 2 drip coffees and a slice of banana bread. Chad rang them up, when the man glanced at the total and said quietly, I thought drip was $2.50 each. Chad didn't hesitate. Prices went up last week, he said. New menu posts Monday. There was no new menu. Naomi had approved pricing for this quarter herself 6 weeks ago. Drip coffee was $2.50. It had not changed. The couple paid the difference without another word, $5, and change extracted without a receipt, the transaction voided in the register 30 seconds after they walked away. Naomi opened the calculator on her phone under the table. 10 minutes later, a young black woman came in alone, ordered a sweet tea to go. Kayla filled the cup to just past the halfway mark, snapped the lid on, and pushed it across the counter without looking up. The woman looked at the cup. She could see through the clear plastic that it was half empty. She opened her mouth, then closed it, picked up the cup, walked out. 3 minutes after that, a white teenage girl ordered the same sweet tea. Kayla filled it to the brim, pressed a sleeve onto the cup, smiled wide, and said, There you go, hon. Same drink, same cup, same Kayla, 4 minutes apart. Then, the moment that made Naomi's stomach turn completely. A young black mother came in with her daughter. The little girl, maybe 4 years old, wearing a purple coat, with a hood shaped like a bear's ears, holding her mother's hand with both of hers. The mother ordered a coffee and a blueberry muffin, and the little girl stood on her tiptoes, trying to see over the counter. The mother set the muffin on the edge of a low table to fix her daughter's coat zipper, and in the 2 seconds her back was turned, the muffin slid off the edge and landed on the floor. The little girl looked at it, looked up at her mother. Her face crumpled. Chad was out from behind the counter before the mother had even turned around. Ma'am, his voice was hard and immediate. That's going to be a charge. Destruction of store property. The mother stared at him. It just fell. She didn't. $4.50, Chad said. That's what it costs. You can pay at the register. The little girl began to cry, a small, confused sound. The kind children make when the air in a room suddenly changes and they don't understand why. The mother's hands were already shaking as she opened her wallet. Her face had gone tight and inward, the particular expression of someone absorbing humiliation in public for the sake of keeping things calm. She paid. She didn't say another word. Chad walked back behind the counter. Not 15 minutes later, a white boy of about 8 knocked an entire glass of orange juice off his table glass, and all a full spill that spread across the floor and under the neighboring chair. Chad walked over with a roll of paper towels crouched down and started cleaning without being asked. He looked up at the boy and grinned. Hey, no worries, buddy. Happens to the best of us. He didn't charge for the glass. He didn't charge for the juice. He ruffled the boy's hair on his way back to the counter. The mother with the little girl in the purple bear coat was still at a corner table. She was watching. She had seen everything. She said nothing, just held her daughter close and stared at the table in front of her. Naomi sat very still. Her coffee had gone cold. She hadn't touched the muffin. Under the table, her thumb moved steadily across the calculator screen, the fake surcharges, the inflated prices, the portion gaps, the voids. She ran the numbers twice. Based on what she had observed in under an hour, Chad was skimming somewhere between $280 and $340 per shift. Kayla was covering it, voiding transactions, adjusting totals, keeping the drawer clean at the end of the night. It wasn't careless. It wasn't improvised. The timing was too smooth, the method too consistent. This had been running for months. She typed to Vanessa, pattern confirmed. Surcharges, price inflation portion, manipulation, systematic voids. This is organized. Pull every register log going back 18 months. Vanessa's reply already pulling. You're going to want to see these numbers. Through the pass-through window, Scylla Washington set a cup on the counter and looked up. Her eyes found Naomi's across the room just for a second, just long enough. She looked away first. But in that second, Naomi saw it clearly. This woman knew. She had known for a long time, and she was terrified. The bell above the door chimed at 10:17 in the morning. An old man stepped inside. He moved carefully, one hand bracing the doorframe. As he cleared the threshold, a carved wooden cane in the other, each step placed with the deliberate patience of someone who had learned not to rush the ground beneath him. He wore a brown wool vest over a pressed white shirt, dark trousers with a sharp crease, and a narrow-brimmed felt hat set straight across his forehead. A thin gold watch on his left wrist. Shoes polished to a clean, quiet shine. He was perhaps 75. Maybe older. His face was deep brown and deeply lined, the kind of face that had earned every crease, and he carried himself with a stillness that filled whatever space he moved into. Naomi recognized the type immediately. The type who dressed for the world the way their parents taught them to. The type who believed that showing up well was a form of dignity, and dignity was non-negotiable. He made his way to the counter without hurrying. Chad was at the register phone face down now, not out of respect, just because he'd set it down 30 seconds ago. He looked up at the old man, the way you look at something that has appeared in your peripheral vision. Not quite seeing. Not quite deciding to see. The man removed his hat and held it at his side. "Morning," he said. His voice was warm and unhurried, the voice of someone who had been greeting people his whole life, and meant it every time. "I'll have my usual, please. The Americano. Black, no sugar." Chad stared at him. "Sir, we don't do the usual here." The old man smiled patiently. I know, I just mean the Americano. I come in most Mondays. The young lady with the green apron usually, I don't know what you're talking about, Chad said. Order from the menu or step aside? The smile didn't leave the old man's face, but something shifted behind his eyes. He looked at the menu board above the counter, found what he needed, and nodded once. Americano, please. Medium, black. Chad punched it in. Kayla drifted over from the far end of the counter, leaning one elbow on the surface, watching the old man the way someone watches a television show they find mildly amusing. That'll be $4.25, Chad said. The Americano was $3.75. Naomi knew it without checking. But the old man simply reached into his breast pocket, produced a worn leather billfold, and counted out exact change. His hands moved slowly, precise but slow, the way hands move when the joints have started to object. Kayla watched his hands. Then she turned to Chad, dropped her voice to something just below a murmur, and made a sound, a small sliding impression of trembling fingers. She looked back up at the old man with wide, theatrical eyes. Sir, do you need help with that? We've got all day. She and Chad exchanged a glance. Chad's shoulders shook once. The old man finished counting, set the coins on the counter without a word, picked up his cane. Thank you, he said. Still warm, still unhurried. The discipline of a man who refused to let other people's cruelty shrink him. He made his way to a table near the window, the same table Naomi would later learn that he chose every single Monday. He set his hat on the seat beside him, folded his hands, waited for his coffee. That was when the group at the table next to him started. 4 young men, early 20s, white-loud in the easy way of people who have never had reason to be careful about how much space they take up. One of them had noticed the old man's careful walk when he came in. He stood up halfway from his chair, now cane in hand, mimicking the gait knees slightly bent, shuffling in a small circle while his friends laughed. Not quietly, not privately. Openly, facing the room, daring anyone to say something. Chad was behind the counter. He watched it happen. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not reach for the phone. He crossed his arms and almost imperceptibly, barely more than a shift of weight. He nodded once in Kayla's direction, the tiny acknowledging nod of someone who sees something they find acceptable. Naomi watched the old man. He had gone very still. His eyes moved to the window, to the street outside, the ordinary Tuesday morning traffic, a woman pushing a stroller past the glass. His hands still folded on the table tightened slowly. Not in anger. In the controlled, practiced way of someone who had spent a lifetime learning to contain what certain rooms tried to pour into him. His knuckles were pale against his dark skin. His jaw was set. He was somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere no one could reach him. The coffee, when it finally came, was delivered by Kayla. She set it on the table without a word, turned without asking if he needed anything, and walked back to the counter. The old man looked at his cup. He did not drink. He sat there for 4 minutes, Naomi counted, and then he picked up his hat, tucked his billfold back into his breast pocket, lifted his cane from the chair beside him, and stood up with great careful effort. He left the Americano untouched and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold, one hand on the frame, and looked back into the room once. Not at Chad, not at the young men who had mocked him. He looked without knowing it directly at Naomi. His expression was not anger. It was something older and quieter than anger. The look of a man who had seen this room before, in 100 different versions across an entire lifetime. Then he stepped outside. The bell chimed softly. That small sound. Naomi set her cup down. Her hands were steady. Her face showed nothing. But under the table, her thumb had stopped moving across the calculator screen, and the phone in her palm had gone warm from how tightly she was holding it. She picked it up and typed to Vanessa. The old man who just left. Find him in the loyalty system. Now. Vanessa's reply came in 6 seconds. Elbert Tatum, member since 2021, 847 visits. Naomi read the number twice. 847 times this man had walked through that door. She set the phone face down on the table, pressed both hands flat against the surface, breathed in once slowly through her nose. Not yet, she told herself. See everything first. Naomi gave herself 5 more minutes at the table. She finished the last of her cold latte. She watched the room settle back into its ordinary rhythm, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low jazz threading through the ceiling speakers, the sound of a spoon against ceramic. The young men who had mocked Mr. Tatum were still there, louder now, unbothered. Chad was back on his phone. Kayla was refilling the pastry case, humming something under her breath. The world had absorbed what just happened and moved on, the way it always did. Naomi stood up, picked up her tote, and made her way toward the restroom at the back of the café. The hallway was narrow, and warmly lit sconces mounted on exposed brick, the noise of the main floor softening to a murmur behind her. Along the left wall hung a series of framed prints that she had chosen personally for every location in the chain. Archival photographs, mostly images of Black-owned businesses from the early 20th century. Barbershops, pharmacies, supper clubs, people who built something in spaces that weren't designed for them. She slowed as she passed one particular frame. A woman behind a counter, 1940s sleeves, rolled expression, composed and certain. Naomi had always liked that photograph. Something about the set of the woman's shoulders. Like she had already decided the room belonged to her. On the way back from the restroom, the kitchen door was cracked open by 2 inches. Naomi almost walked past it. Then she heard her name, not her name, but the word that served the same purpose. Hey, low, urgent, almost a whisper. Naomi stopped. Through the gap in the door, a pair of eyes found hers. Scylla Washington stood just inside the kitchen apron, dusted with flour along the hem, a small burn mark on the back of her right wrist that she'd had for so long she'd stopped noticing it. She looked left down the hallway, looked right. Her jaw was tight. "Can you come in for a second?" she said. "Please." Naomi looked back toward the main floor. Chad was still at the counter, back half-turned. Kayla was on the far side of the pastry case. Nobody was watching the hallway. She pushed the kitchen door open and stepped inside. The kitchen smelled like warm butter and coffee grounds, the industrial hum of refrigeration underneath everything. Scylla let the door swing almost shut behind them, not fully closed, but close enough for privacy. She turned to face Naomi, and whatever composure she'd been holding started to show its seams. "I don't know who you are," Scylla said quietly, "but you've been sitting out there for almost 2 hours, and you haven't eaten anything, and you keep looking at the register, and I have to tell somebody." Naomi held her gaze, said nothing. "Your drink," Scylla said. "The one you ordered this morning. Before it went out, I was at the espresso station, and I had a clear line to the pass-through. Chad came around, said he was adjusting the cup sleeve, but I watched his hands." She paused, swallowed. He turned away from the window, but he didn't go far enough. I saw him lean over the cup, both hands, for about 3 seconds. The temperature of the room didn't change, but something in Naomi went very still. "You're sure?" Naomi said. Not a question. A confirmation she needed, stated plainly. "I've been standing at that station for 5 years, Scylla said. "I know what adjusting a cup sleeve looks like." A silence held between them. The refrigerator hummed. From the main floor, muffled and distant, came the sound of Chad laughing at something. "I've tried to report it," Scylla continued. Her voice had dropped lower, and something in it had changed, the urgency giving way to something older, heavier. the exhaustion of someone who had been carrying a weight alone for too long. Twice. Wrote it all out, the fake charges, the way he talks to customers, the cash I've seen him pocket. Submitted it through the regional office. Naomi said, "Nothing." The word came out flat. Both times. The second time I followed up, and Doug, the regional manager, told me the complaints had been reviewed and found unsubstantiated. That was his word. Unsubstantiated. She looked down at her hands. Chad called in late 3 times the week after that. Doug still gave him a glowing quarterly review. I saw it posted in the back office. "Doug Mercer," Naomi said. Scylla looked up. "You know him. I know the name." Naomi's voice was even careful, giving nothing away. "Keep going." "I almost quit," Scylla said. 8 months ago I had my resignation written out. I was going to hand it in on a Tuesday. She looked toward the small pass-through window toward the main floor she couldn't quite see from here. "But I love this place. What it's supposed to be. The mural, the music, the way it felt when I first started, people coming in and actually feeling welcome. I kept thinking if I just waited, someone would eventually see it." Her voice caught slightly on the last word. She pressed her lips together. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had filed 2 complaints that disappeared, who had written a resignation letter and then put it away, who had stood at her station for 5 years, watching something she loved be taken apart from the inside, one fraudulent transaction at a time. "You didn't quit," Naomi said quietly. "That matters more than you know right now." Scylla studied her face. Something shifted in her expression, not quite recognition, but the beginning of it. A question forming that she wasn't sure she was ready to ask. Naomi didn't give her the answer yet. She held her gaze for 1 more second, then said simply, "Thank you. I hear you." She stepped back through the kitchen door into the hallway, walked calmly back to her table, sat down, picked up her phone and looked at her coffee cup, the latte she had barely touched, still sitting where she'd left it. She did not pick it up. She typed to Vanessa, "Possible beverage tampering on my order. Eyewitness inside. Preserve my cup. Do not let it leave the premises. Get the health department on the phone. Pull every formal complaint filed at this location for the past 20 months. She set the phone down. Her hands were perfectly steady. Vanessa's reply. "Cup is flagged on camera. Health department contacted. Team is already in the parking lot." Naomi sat with the untouched cup in front of her for 3 more minutes. She was not stalling. She was finishing her count. She wanted every element documented, every pattern complete, every fraudulent transaction captured on the feed before she moved. She had learned a long time ago that the difference between a complaint and a case was patience. Anyone could complain. A case required you to wait until the picture was whole. At 11:04 in the morning, she stood up. She picked up her tote bag. She walked to the counter with the same unhurried step she had used all morning. No acceleration, no shift in posture, nothing that signaled what was coming. She stopped at the register and waited until Chad looked up. "I have a question about my order," she said. "The specialty prep surcharge that was added this morning, I'd like to see it posted on your menu board, because I've looked, and I can't find it anywhere." Chad straightened slowly. His expression moved through several things in rapid succession: irritation, assessment, the decision that she was not a threat before settling into something hard and controlled. "It's a standard fee," he said. "All specialty orders carry it." "A medium oat milk latte is a standard menu item," Naomi said. "I've ordered it at 8 other root and roast locations. I've never been charged a preparation fee." "Then those locations weren't charging correctly," Chad said. His voice had dropped into the register he used for endings. This is how we run things here. I'd like to speak with a manager, Naomi said. Something flickered across his face. You're looking at him. I'm the shift manager, and my brother Doug is the regional director. So if you're thinking about calling someone, he spread his hands in a gesture of performed helplessness. Go ahead. I don't want to call anyone, Naomi said. I want an itemized receipt that reflects what I actually ordered. Chad leaned forward across the counter. Lady, the transaction is closed. The receipt printed. You paid. We're done. The cafe had gone quieter. Not silent. The espresso machine still hissed. The music still played, but the quality of the noise had changed. The couple near the window had stopped talking. The woman 2 tables back had lowered her phone without meaning to. The attention of the room had shifted subtle and collective the way it does when the air changes. Naomi looked at Chad for one long moment. Do you treat all your customers this way? She said. Or just the ones who look like me? The room went still. A fork stopped moving somewhere behind her. The jazz between tracks left a gap that felt enormous. Chad's face went through a transformation, surprise, then offense, then something that looked almost like pleasure, the particular pleasure of a man who had been waiting for an excuse. He stepped out from behind the counter. He crossed the distance between them until he was close enough that she could smell the gum he was chewing. His voice dropped low and flat and certain. I'm going to need you to lower your voice. I haven't raised it, Naomi said. You're making my staff uncomfortable. I asked a question. Chad turned his head toward Kayla, who was already moving phone in hand, sliding behind the register with practiced efficiency. She dialed. Her voice came out high and slightly breathless, a performance calibrated to produce a specific effect. Yes, hi, I need to report a disturbance at the Root and Roast on Decatur Street. We have a customer who's been aggressive with staff and is refusing to leave. We feel unsafe. Naomi had not raised her voice once. She had not moved toward anyone. She had not made a single threatening gesture. She was standing at a counter she owned in a building she owned, asking about a charge she had been fraudulently assessed. But the call was already made, and both of them knew exactly what they were doing. Chad turned back to her. His voice dropped lower, almost friendly now, which was worse. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to sit down or you're going to leave. And if you don't do one of those 2 things in the next 60 seconds, he let the implication finish the sentence. Then he turned to Officer Whitfield, who hadn't arrived yet, but whose arrival he was already performing toward, and said to the room loudly enough for everyone to hear, She's been erratic since she came in. He paused just long enough to make it land. Honestly, I was worried she might be on something. You know how it gets. No evidence. No witness who agreed. Just a sentence designed to arrive in the room before the uniform did, to shape what the uniform would see when it walked through the door. Chad knew what he was doing. He had done it before. The tone was practiced, not accusatory, just concerned the voice of a reasonable man reluctantly sharing an observation. The kind of voice that history had taught certain people to trust without asking questions. Naomi did not respond. She turned, walked back to her table, and sat down. Her hands were folded on the surface. Her face was composed. Several customers were recording now, phones raised at discreet angles, arms propped on tables. An older black woman in the far corner had gathered her purse into her lap and pulled her coat closed. The involuntary preparation of someone who had lived long enough to know that certain situations required being ready to move. 4 minutes later, Officer Dana Whitfield walked through the front door. Mid-40s, close-cropped hair, the measured posture of someone who read rooms before speaking. Her eyes swept the cafe in a single practiced pass. The counter, the customers, Chad already moving toward her, and at the back table a woman sitting quietly, with both hands visible and flat on the surface in front of her. Whitfield looked at Chad. Then she looked at Naomi. Her expression did not change, but something in her attention shifted. Chad reached her in 4 strides, voice already running. "Officer, thank you for coming. That's the woman back table. She's been harassing my staff and refusing to—" Whitfield held up one hand without looking at him. She was still looking at Naomi. She walked to the back table. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some ID." Naomi reached into her tote bag slowly, deliberately, every movement visible. She produced her driver's license and placed it on the table. Whitfield picked it up, read the name, looked at Naomi, looked at the license again. Outside, through the front window, a black SUV pulled into the lot. The door opened. The SUV's door swung open, and Vanessa Osei stepped out. Navy blazer, pressed white collar visible beneath it, black heels that struck the pavement with a clean, decisive sound. She carried a tablet in one hand and a leather portfolio in the other. Behind her, 2 broad-shouldered men in black polo shirts followed, calm-faced, unhurried, the small gold Root and Roast logo stitched above their left breast pockets. Corporate security. Every head near the window turned. The couple by the glass watched Vanessa cross the parking lot with the focused attention of people who understood instinctively that whatever was about to happen had been building for a long time. The bell above the door chimed. Vanessa walked in. Chad was still standing near Officer Whitfield, mid-sentence, building his narrative, with the practiced confidence of someone who had never had it fail him. He turned at the sound of the door, registered the blazer and the tablet and the 2 men behind her, and his mouth kept moving for 2 more words before his brain caught up and stopped it. He stepped forward, chin raised. "Ma'am, we're in the middle of a situation here. You're going to need to wait." Vanessa did not look at him, did not slow down. Her heels crossed the floor in a straight line past the counter, past the register, past Officer Whitfield, and stopped at Naomi's table. "Ms. Carter," she said. Her voice was clear and even and loud enough for the entire room to hear without being raised. "We have the full feed. Legal has reviewed everything. We're ready when you are." The room went quiet in stages, first the table nearest the counter, then the middle of the café, then the far corners, until the only sounds were the espresso machine cycling down and the jazz track fading between songs. Chad's mouth opened, closed. His eyes moved from Vanessa to Naomi and back again. "Ms. Carter," he repeated. The name came out uncertain, like a word in a language he wasn't sure he was pronouncing correctly. Vanessa turned to face him. She stood straight, tablet held at her side, and when she spoke, her voice carried the particular quality of someone who had prepared for this moment with great care and was not in a hurry. "My name is Vanessa Osei. I am the Chief Operations Officer of the Root and Roast Incorporated." The words landed in the room the way a key turns in a lock, a small sound, and then everything opens. Chad took a half step backward. His heel caught the base of the counter, and he steadied himself with one hand, a gesture he immediately regretted, because it made him look exactly as off balance as he was. Kayla set the phone down on the register. She set it down slowly, the way you set something down when your hands have stopped working properly. Naomi stood up from the table. She didn't rush. She pushed back her chair, picked up her tote bag, and rose to her full height. Then she reached up to the zipper pull of her hoodie pocket and turned it outward, revealing the tiny body camera clipped inside. The lens, no larger than a pencil eraser, had been running since she pulled out of her garage that morning. She looked at Chad, then at Kayla. Then she spoke. "My name is Naomi Carter. I founded the Root and Roast 14 years ago with a $400 pushcart and a thermos of my grandmother's coffee on the corner of Ponce de Leon Avenue. Every bean we source, every cup we serve, every paycheck that comes out of this location, that's mine." She paused. "And so is yours." Absolute silence. No forks, no machine hiss, no music, no, just the hum of fluorescent light and the sound of Chad's breathing getting audibly heavier. His face moved through its changes like weather first red, then a draining white that started at his forehead and moved downward. His lips parted. Nothing came out. Vanessa turned the tablet around and held it so the screen faced the room. Split display, left side showed the body camera feed crisp and time-stamped, capturing every interaction from the moment Naomi walked through the door. Right side showed the cafe's own security camera footage, angles Chad and Kayla had apparently stopped thinking about months ago or had decided no one ever reviewed. The room watched in silence, Chad's hands hovering over Naomi's cup before it went out. The surcharge being punched in and voided in the same shift cycle 3 times in one morning. The young mother counting out $4.50 for a muffin her daughter had accidentally dropped. The sweet tea filled halfway for one woman filled to the brim for the next. Mr. Elbert Tatum standing at the counter with exact change while Kayla made her small, practiced cruelty with her hands. 4.5 months of footage compressed into 4 minutes. Officer Whitfield watched the screen without moving. When the beverage tampering clip played Chad's hands, the cup, the deliberate angle of his body blocking the pass-through window. Her hand moved to the notepad on her belt. Her jaw tightened visibly. Chad made one last reach for solid ground. "My brother," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. Doug Mercer, he's the regional director. He'll just call him. He can explain." Doug Mercer, Vanessa said, cutting across him cleanly, was suspended without pay 47 minutes ago. Our legal team is currently in direct contact with him regarding the suppression of 5 formal employee complaints and the falsification of performance reviews dating back 19 months. She let that sit for a long moment. There is no one left to call Chad. Chad's knees buckled slightly, a small involuntary dip that he caught by pressing both palms flat on the counter behind him. Kayla made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob, compressed and airless, like a person who has just understood that the door they were counting on has been locked from the outside. Whitfield closed her notepad and looked at Vanessa. "I'll need a full copy of that footage. The tampering segment specifically, that's a potential felony under Georgia criminal statute." "Your department will have everything within the hour," Vanessa said. "Our legal team is prepared to cooperate fully." Naomi stood in the middle of her own cafe in her faded brown hoodie and her worn sneakers, surrounded by the silence of 2 people whose entire constructed world had just come apart in under 5 minutes. She looked at Chad, the man who had told a woman in a brown hoodie that this wasn't her kind of place, and she spoke quietly. "You had good work. You had people who trusted you with something they loved, and this is what you did with it." Chad said nothing. For the first time all morning, he had absolutely nothing to say. Chad broke first. His shoulders dropped all at once, not gradually, but the way a structure fails when the last load-bearing point gives way. He pushed off the counter, took 2 steps toward Naomi, and raised both palms in front of him. His voice came out uneven and climbing. "Ms. Carter, look, I know how this looks. But I was under pressure. The numbers were bad. Doug was on me every week about margins, and it got out of hand. I swear I didn't mean for it to go this far." Naomi looked at him the way you look at someone who has just said something that reveals more than they intended. "Out of hand," she repeated. "I'm sorry. I genuinely am. If you just give me a chance to... We have footage going back 17 months, Chad." Her voice was steady, not raised, not cold, just precise. 17 months of fraudulent surcharges on customers who couldn't afford to argue. 17 months of cash removed from this register and pocketed during your shifts. 17 months of a system you built, not a mistake, not a bad week, not pressure from above, a system you designed, and Kayla helped you run. she let each sentence land. You targeted people based on how they looked. You made a mother pay for a muffin her 4-year-old dropped by accident and didn't charge the next child a single cent. You mocked a 73-year-old man who had walked through that door 847 times, and you tampered with a customer's drink. The last sentence fell differently than the others. Heavier, more final. That's not pressure. That's not margins. That's who you are when you think no one is watching. Chad's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes were wet, not from guilt, Naomi could see that clearly, but from the specific fear of a man who has just understood that every exit has been closed. Then Kayla tried. She came out from behind the register, hands clasped in front of her, tears already moving down her face in the practiced way of someone who had learned early that crying produced results. Her voice was high and trembling. I want you to know I hated it. I hated every minute of it. He told me it was how the location stayed profitable and I was scared of losing my job. I have rent, I have... Vanessa opened the leather portfolio. She removed 3 printed screenshots, time-stamped, specific sections highlighted in yellow, and laid them on the counter one by one with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been building toward this moment for weeks. This, she said, placing the first, is you voiding a fraudulent transaction, while Chad counted cash behind you. 11:47 a.m. 6 weeks ago. Second screenshot. This is you demonstrating to Chad which customers to apply the surcharge to. The footage includes audio. Third, and this is you laughing, specifically laughing after Mr. Elbert Tatum left this building without his coffee. Kayla stared at the photographs. The tears kept coming, but the performance behind them had collapsed. What was left was just a woman looking at evidence of herself. You weren't afraid of him, Vanessa said. You were his partner. Kayla grabbed the edge of the counter. Her knees had stopped being reliable. Officer Whitfield stepped forward. She had been quiet since the footage played, absorbing everything with the focused stillness of someone building a timeline. Now she turned to Chad. I need you to understand that the beverage tampering footage has already been flagged for our forensics unit. We have the physical cup. Depending on what the lab returns, you are looking at criminal tampering charges under Georgia Code 16725. That is a felony. Chad's face had gone completely white. The gum he'd been chewing earlier was visible between his back teeth, forgotten. Additionally, Whitfield continued, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor in this state. I responded to a call describing an aggressive customer making threats. What the footage shows is a woman who asked a question about her receipt. She looked at him evenly. We will be discussing that separately. Naomi straightened her back. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision that had been made before she even walked back to the counter. Chad Mercer and Kayla Finch, you are both terminated from the root and roast, effective immediately. Gross misconduct, theft of company funds, discriminatory conduct toward customers, health code violations, and criminal tampering. Your final paychecks will be processed and mailed. You are not to return to this or any root and roast location. She did not shout it. She did not perform it. She did not shout it. She did. She said it the way you say something that has simply become true. Corporate security moved forward, one on each side, and walked Chad and Kayla toward the door. Chad moved with his head down, hands at his sides, his footsteps slow and heavy on the dark wood floor. The same floor he had stood on all morning, like he owned it. Kayla was still crying. Quietly now. The real kind. The bell above the door chimed twice as they went through. That same cheerful sound it always made. But this time it sounded like a period at the end of a very long sentence. For a moment, the café was completely still. Then, from somewhere near the window, a single pair of hands began to clap, slowly at first. Then, a second person joined. Then, a third. The older black woman, who had pulled her coat closed during Whitfield's arrival, was pressing one hand over her mouth and clapping with the other. Naomi did not take a bow. She did not smile for the room. She turned and walked toward the kitchen. Scylla Washington was standing at the pass-through window. She hadn't moved since Vanessa walked in. Her apron was still dusted with flour at the hem, her hands still loose at her sides, but her face had changed entirely. She looked like someone standing in a doorway that had been locked for years, watching it swing open for the first time, afraid to believe the hinges would hold. Naomi stopped in front of her. 5 years, Naomi said quietly. 5 years you showed up for this place when the people running it were taking it apart. You filed complaints no one acted on. You stayed anyway. You warned a stranger at risk to yourself. Scylla's chin dropped. Her lips pressed together. I'm making you shift supervisor of this location. Effective today. Every complaint you filed is now part of a formal corporate investigation, and your name is on the record as the person who tried to stop this. The spatula Scylla had been holding slipped from her fingers and clattered against the steel counter. She covered her mouth with both hands. And then the tears came, not the desperate, panicked kind that Kayla had cried, but the deep, shaking, long-held kind that only arrives when something you had stopped believing in finally happens. Naomi put a hand briefly on her shoulder. Then she turned and walked back through the kitchen door, through the hallway lined with photographs of people who had built something in rooms not designed for them, and out into the café that still smelled like espresso and warm butter, and everything she had intended it to be. She had one more thing to do. She walked to the table by the window, the table with the view of Decatur Street, the table an old man had chosen every Monday for 3 years. She stood there for a moment looking at the empty seat. Then she picked up her phone and called Vanessa. "Elbert Tatum," she said. "I need his contact information. Tonight." The audit began the following morning and ran for 11 days. An independent forensic accounting firm brought in by the Root and Roast's legal team, not its internal finance department, tore the Decatur Street location apart. Every register log, every voided transaction, every shift report, every reconciliation document going back 20 months. What they found was worse than even Vanessa's preliminary numbers had suggested. Chad's surcharge scheme had been running for 17 months. Not a few bad weeks. Not a period of poor judgment. 17 consecutive months of fraudulent fees, inflated totals, and cash removed from the register during his shifts. The total amount stolen came to $67,420. Kayla Finch had been directly involved in at least 23,000 of that, processing voids, adjusting end-of-shift reports, ensuring the drawer balanced cleanly every night. She had not been coerced. The footage showed her instructing Chad on timing. She had been a full architect of the system, but the rot ran deeper than 2 cashiers. Doug Mercer, Chad's brother and the regional director, responsible for overseeing this location, and 9 others across the greater Atlanta area, had received 5 formal written complaints from staff members. 5. Each one submitted through proper channels with dates and signatures and specific documented incidents. All 5 had been buried, filed in a locked drawer in the regional office. Never entered into the corporate complaint tracking system, never escalated. 3 of those complaints had come from Scylla Washington. 2 had come from other staff members who no longer worked at the location, people who had eventually left because the system they reported to had refused to function. Doug had also submitted 14 months of falsified performance reviews for Chad. On paper, Chad was exemplary, punctual, customer-focused, recommended for advancement. The reviews read like fiction. They were fiction, fabricated by a man who called it supporting family. The Decatur Police Department moved within 72 hours of the incident. Chad Wilson was charged with theft by taking criminal tampering with food or drink under Georgia Code 16725, a felony filing a false police report, and multiple civil rights violations connected to discriminatory service practices. The lab results from Naomi's preserved coffee cup returned within a week. The findings were unambiguous. His bail was set at $40,000. He couldn't make it. Kayla Finch accepted a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to accessory to theft and conspiracy to commit fraud. She received 22 months of probation, 240 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record that would follow her into every room she tried to enter for the rest of her professional life. Doug Mercer was charged with obstruction of justice, falsifying business records, and conspiracy. He surrendered himself at the Decatur precinct on a Wednesday morning. He was convicted and sentenced to 14 months and permanently barred from holding any management position in the food service industry in the state of Georgia. The civil suits came separately. The Root and Roast's legal team filed against all three for damages to brand reputation, lost revenue, and documented customer harm. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. 11 affected customers identified through register logs, security footage, and loyalty program records joined a formal civil rights complaint with the Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity. The case was later cited in a statewide training module distributed to over 4,000 food service establishments across the state. The video reached 5 million views before the weekend was over. One of the customers who had been recording the woman near the window, who had watched everything with her phone at a careful angle, posted the footage on Saturday afternoon. By Sunday evening, 2 local Atlanta news stations had picked it up. By Monday morning, it had gone national. CNN ran a segment. NBC covered it in the morning broadcast. The clip of Naomi standing in her faded brown hoodie, reaching up to reveal the camera, saying quietly, "I founded this place 14 years ago with a $400 pushcart." That clip was shared so many times, it became something else entirely. A moment that belonged to everyone who had ever been looked through in a room they had every right to be in. Naomi held a press conference at corporate headquarters 3 days later. She announced 3 immediate changes across all 31 locations. First, mandatory bias and service equity training for every employee, from barista to regional director, to be completed within 60 days with annual renewal. Second, a confidential employee reporting line connecting directly to the corporate legal office, bypassing regional management entirely, so that no complaint could ever be buried in a drawer again. Third, the creation of a community welcome fund seeded with $600,000 of Naomi's personal money to support customers who experienced discrimination at food service establishments across the Southeast. Then she paused. The press room was quiet. "There was a man," she said, "who came into my cafe on that morning. A man who had been coming through that door every Monday for 3 years. 847 visits. He ordered his coffee, was mocked in front of a room full of people, and walked out without a word because he had learned across a lifetime that certain rooms require you to absorb things you should never have to absorb." She stopped. "His name is Elbert Tatum. I called him personally the night of the incident. We spoke for 40 minutes. He told me he had almost stopped coming 6 months ago." The room was completely still. "Mr. Tatum will receive a lifetime dining pass to any Root and Roast location in the country. And he received an apology, not from our communications team, not from a press release, from me." 6 months later, the Decatur Street location felt like a different place. Not the walls, the dark wood paneling was the same. Not the mural Darnell Oates's painted faces still gathered around their tables, still laughing, still belonging somewhere. The Edison bulb still glowed warm above the counter. Coltrane still drifted through the speakers on slow mornings. What changed was the air. Scylla Washington stood behind the counter, not hidden at the espresso station, not watching through a pass-through window. Her name tag read, Shift Supervisor. Her posture read something louder. She greeted every person who walked through the door and meant it without exception. The staff around her were new, trained carefully, diverse in the way of people who had been chosen for who they were, rather than who they reminded someone of. Every Monday morning at 10:15, the bell above the door chimed, and Elbert Tatum walked in. He didn't brace the doorframe anymore. He moved with the same careful, measured step that would never change, but his shoulders were different, looser. The set of a man who has been told in the clearest possible terms that this room was built for him. "Morning, Mr. Tatum," Scylla would say. The usual, "You know it, baby," he would answer. Black, no sugar. He kept his lifetime pass tucked in the front pocket of his billfold, behind his library card, and a photograph of his late wife. He had showed it to Scylla once, not to use it, just to show her. Like a thing worth keeping close. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, Naomi drove the Camry back to Decatur Street. She parked in the same spot she had used 6 months earlier. She sat for a moment, looking through the front window at the mural on the back wall, at the faces her friend Darnell had painted, all of them gathered, all of them present, all of them home. Then she got out and went inside. Scylla looked up from the counter. Her eyes went wide, then soft. Then she came around the counter and hugged Naomi without a word. Naomi hugged her back. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Neither needed to. Later, Naomi stood outside on the sidewalk and looked up at the sign in the Root and Roast. The same logo she had sketched on a napkin 14 years ago, sitting on the tailgate of a borrowed truck, trying to name something she hadn't built yet. She thought about the woman in that archival photograph on the hallway wall. Sleeves rolled, expression certain. Standing behind a counter in a room not designed for her, as if it had been designed for nothing else. She thought about a pushcart. $400. A thermos of her grandmother's coffee. She thought about a man in a felt hat who had walked through a door 847 times because he believed the room on the other side was worth coming back to. The people who dismiss you based on what you're wearing will never understand. This dignity is not something you earn in a room. You bring it with you. And the ones who tried to take it, they were always the ones who had the least of their own. The woman they tried to turn away built the room they were standing in. And the lesson she left behind wasn't about power or revenge. It was simpler than that. Treat people as if they matter, not because you know who they are, but because you don't, and because it's right. Every single time, whether the cameras are rolling or not. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what this one made you feel. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that dignity is non-negotiable. And if you're not subscribed yet, you already know what to do.